What if I told you your old television doesn't just disappear? Every year, over 2 million tons of TVs are thrown away. Most people assume they're gone. But locked inside, every dead screen is a treasure of copper and gold, and enough toxic lead to contaminate entire neighborhoods. I am going to take you inside the massive recycling plants where millions of obsolete TVs are dismantled, shredded, and melted into pure copper. This is the hidden world of the television graveyard. Every home in America once had one. The bulky CRT television, a 4-pound lead bomb wrapped in plastic. Over 580 million of them were sold just since the 1980s. Today, most are gone, replaced by sleek flat screens. But gone isn't gone. They're piling up in warehouses, landfills, and illegal dumps across the globe. And inside that mountain of electronic waste sits a fortune in copper and gold that almost nobody is recovering. The question isn't whether we can recycle them. It's why we aren't doing it faster, and what happens if we don't. They gather in the shadows of industrial parks and forgotten lots. Millions of them, stacked floor to ceiling like dead soldiers. They call them television graveyards, giant warehouses where old CRT screens sit entombed, waiting for a fate most people never think about. In the United States alone, over 580 million of these cathode ray tube televisions have been sold since the 80s. And every single one of them contains up to 8 pounds of lead. Not on the outside, it's sealed inside the glass. That's not counting the mercury, cadmium, and barium also packed into the circuitry. An entire generation of entertainment was built on a mountain of toxic materials that doesn't ever break down on its own. But here is the twist. Trapped inside all that poison is a fortune. Copper wiring, aluminum heat sinks, steel frames, and printed circuit boards loaded with gold, silver, and palladium. 1 ton of e-waste, just a single truckload, can contain 100 times more gold than a ton of raw gold ore. So, while the world upgraded to flat screens, these graveyards became accidental mines. And that attracted a new kind of prospector. Facilities equipped with robotic dismantlers, laser sorters, and massive smelting furnaces now promise to melt those old TVs into pure copper and precious metals. The economics look incredible, but there's a reason most of these screens still sit untouched in the dark. Because getting to that copper isn't like melting down old pipes. You have to crack open the very thing that keeps the lead locked inside. And if you do it wrong, if the furnace isn't just right, if the ventilation fails, if a single tube shatters the wrong way, you don't just lose the metal. You unleash a plume of toxic dust that can contaminate groundwater for miles. That's exactly what almost happened in one small town when an unassuming recycling yard tried to cash in without knowing what they were really handling. That town was a place called Clearwater, a quiet community on the edge of the Rust Belt. A local scrapper named Dale figured he'd stumbled onto easy money. He'd collected thousands of old TVs from curbside pickups and storage auctions, crammed them into a rented warehouse, and started smashing them open with a sledgehammer to get at the copper yolks inside. No masks, no ventilation, no hazmat suits. Within 3 weeks, the ground around his operation tested positive for lead dust at levels 400 times above the EPA limit. The soil samples were so contaminated that the county had to cordon off the entire block. Dale didn't know that each CRT tube was engineered with lead-impregnated glass, a shield meant to block radiation, but a poison when shattered. The mercury in the circuit boards was even worse. It had already begun leaching into the drainage ditch that fed the town's water supply. They caught it just in time. A neighbor noticed a metallic taste in her tap water and called the state environmental agency. When inspectors arrived, they found Dale standing in a pile of broken glass, surrounded by a haze of phosphor dust. He'd been breathing it in for weeks. His blood lead levels were so high, they hospitalized him. But here is the thing. Dale is not the exception. He is the norm. In dozens of developing countries, and in unregulated corners of the developed world, backyard recyclers are doing exactly what Dale did. Burning circuit boards to recover gold, cracking tubes to get copper, dumping the leftovers into rivers and open pits. The United Nations estimates that up to 90% of the world's e-waste is traded or dumped illegally. and old televisions are among the most dangerous items in the stream. What makes this so maddening is that the legal recycling process actually works. I've seen it. Inside a proper facility, the same television that could poison a town becomes a source of pure metal. The process starts with robotic disassembly lines that strip off the plastic housing. Lasers scan the components, separating the high-grade circuit boards from the copper-bearing cables. The CRT tubes are handled in sealed, negative pressure rooms where a diamond wire saw cuts the panel glass from the funnel glass, isolating the lead into a single fraction that gets sent to a lead smelter. Nothing escapes into the air. The crushed glass then enters a furnace heated to over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, the lead vitrifies into an inert slag that can be used in road construction, while the copper and other metals melt into ingots for resale. One fully processed CRT television can yield up to 3 pounds of copper, several ounces of aluminum, and a few grams of silver and gold. A facility running at scale can extract over 100,000 pounds of copper a month. The math is undeniable. So, why are most TVs still sitting in graveyards or getting smashed open by desperate guys like Dale? The answer is a brutal economic trap. Recycling a single CRT costs between $10 and $20 more than the value of the materials you recover. The leaded glass is expensive to process safely, and the market for recycled lead glass has collapsed since the last major lead smelter in the US closed in 2013. So the companies that once promised to turn garbage into gold are now charging hefty fees to take the TVs, or they're simply stockpiling them, hoping for a breakthrough that hasn't come. There is a twist, though. That breakthrough might be closer than anyone expected, and it's happening not in some high-tech lab in California, but in the most unexpected place. The most unexpected place is a defunct steel mill in Poland. A chemist named Katarzyna Nowak spent 15 years studying a puzzle nobody else wanted to touch. How do you turn leaded CRT glass from a hazardous waste into a useful product without spending $40 per tube? Most experts said it was impossible. The lead was too tightly bound, the glass too fragile, the economics too unforgiving. Katarzyna ignored them. She found that by mixing the crushed lead glass with silica, limestone, and a specific binding polymer, then firing it in a rotary kiln at exactly 1,750 degrees, the lead fuses into a stable ceramic matrix. The resulting material is harder than concrete, completely inert, and can be cast into building blocks or road paving tiles. Even better, the process costs less than $12 per television. For the first time in history, recycling a CRT could become profitable. The implications are staggering. Every year, over 181,000 tons of televisions are recycled in the US. But that's only 17% of what's discarded. The rest, millions upon millions of screens, sit in warehouses or landfills, leaking lead and mercury into the soil. If Katarzyna's method scales, those graveyards transform from liabilities into literal gold mines. One facility could process 500 tons of CRT glass per day, extracting copper, aluminum, and precious metals while turning the toxic glass into usable construction material. The lead problem becomes the lead solution. But now we hit the real ugliness. The existing recycling industry runs on fees. Since the last major lead smelter in the country closed in 2013, companies charge municipalities and consumers up to $30 to accept each old television. They call it a disposal fee. That revenue stream is worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually. If the glass suddenly becomes an asset instead of a liability, that whole model collapses. The people running the television graveyards don't want the machine to work. Some of them are actively blocking it. Katarzyna's startup received 2 buyout offers from shell companies linked to North American e-waste aggregators. When she refused, a sudden wave of regulatory audits hit her pilot plant, delaying certification by 18 months. Whistleblowers in the industry have told journalists that stockpilers have lobbied the EPA to maintain CRT glass's classification as hazardous waste, no matter what new processing methods exist, because that label is what keeps the disposal fees legal and the fence around the graveyard business intact. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. Over 580 million CRT televisions were sold in the US since the 80s, and most haven't been processed. As they sit, their leaded glass slowly disintegrates. One broken tube can poison 50,000 gallons of water. Multiply that by millions, and you are staring at an environmental catastrophe that makes Flint look like a spilled cup of coffee. And then there's the final, cruel irony. While regulators argue and corporations protect their fees, the illegal operators like Dale and Clearwater are multiplying. They'll burn, smash, and strip anything to get the copper, because to them, the toxic hazards are invisible and the immediate cash is everything. The copper recovered from one television sells for about $4 on the black market. That might not sound like much, but for a desperate person in a poor town, it's a meal, it's rent, it's survival. The graveyards don't just hold toxic glass, they hold human desperation. Which brings us to the moment of reckoning. We have a breakthrough that could turn a poisoning crisis into a profit center. We have an industry fighting tooth and nail to stop it. And we have a vast, invisible army of victims and scavengers caught in the middle. The question is no longer about technology. It's about whether we will choose to do what makes sense, or whether the graveyards will keep growing until they swallow us whole. In 2023, something shifted. Katarzyna's pilot plant cleared its final regulatory hurdle. A consortium of European construction firms placed a €200 million order for her lead glass ceramic blocks, citing the material's strength and its lower carbon footprint compared to traditional concrete. Suddenly, what was once a toxic waste stream became a registered building product. The math flipped overnight. Within 6 months, 3 additional facilities in Germany, Spain, and the Czech Republic announced plans to adopt the same kiln-based process. The impact hit the television graveyards like a wrecking ball. Stockpilers, who had been sitting on mountains of CRT glass, waiting for the disposal fees to climb, saw their inventory transform from a storage cost into a saleable commodity. Some adapted quickly, installing the new equipment and hiring the engineers who understood the process. Others resisted, filing lawsuits and lobbying for stricter hazard classifications. But the economics were now undeniable. A facility that once charged $25 per television to take it could now generate $40 per unit in material revenue. The ones who pivoted first became industry leaders. And what about the Dales of the world? The backyard recyclers in developing nations? That part is slower, harder, and more painful. Nonprofits and international aid organizations have started piloting micro-refineries in Ghana, Nigeria, and India, small, sealed processing units that use the same kiln technology on a village scale. They train local workers to safely dismantle CRTs, feed the glass into the furnace, and produce bricks that build homes. It's not charity, it's commerce. A worker who once earned $4 a day smashing tubes can now earn $15 a day producing building materials. Lead poisoning rates in the pilot communities have fallen by over 70% in just 18 months. But just as this resolution takes shape, a new shadow looms. That is the final, sobering detail. The same flat-screen TVs that replaced the CRTs, the LED, LCD, and plasma panels we all rushed to buy, are now entering the waste stream at staggering speed. And they are, in some ways, worse. Their backlights contain mercury vapor, their circuit boards hold arsenic and beryllium, and their indium tin oxide coatings are both rare and toxic. The recycling infrastructure for these newer screens barely exists. While we were trying to close the graveyard of the past, we were already building a far larger graveyard of the future. The cycle begins again. But now we know the pattern. And at least this time, we have the tools to break it before the dust settles. And the cycle begins again. But now we know the pattern. Every screen we replace, every upgrade we celebrate, creates another body in a graveyard that grows faster than our ability to bury it. The copper and gold inside each device will always attract those who see treasure, not poison. The question is whether we will build an industry that extracts both value and safety, or whether we keep letting the Dales of the world crack open the lead with their bare hands. The kiln in Poland proved that the solution exists. The micro-refineries in Ghana proved that it can work anywhere. The only thing missing is the collective will to stop treating our electronic past like someone else's problem. So here is the real takeaway. Next time you throw away a television or a phone or a laptop, remember that you are feeding a machine that is both amazing and terrifying. And if you want more stories that uncover the hidden systems shaping our world, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll keep going deeper. I'll see you in the next one.